So before Billy's accident, I mean, he was, a normal teenager. He liked video games. He liked computers. He liked taking them apart and putting them back together. I mean, that part of him didn't change.
This event, though, it really it's had a deep effect on me, though.
Whenever he had his near-death experience, I think that Billy saw or thought he saw or did see something dark, and it did scare him very much so.
I never once thought about God after I had died. It was like he had been stripped from my mind. I went to church my whole life. You would think that if I had known that I had just died, that I would be calling out or reaching out or asking for God to help me. God never entered my mind at all.
I don't know everything there is to know about afterlife or when people die, but most of the time when people are headed towards heaven, usually there's a light. You've probably heard those stories before. And usually there's darkness or there's a sense of fear if people are headed in the other direction.
The dark was no big deal, but I didn't know where I was, and I was all alone. It's not like I heard other people making noise or wailing or anything else. It was just like being all alone in pitch black darkness and having no hope of ever leaving. I was 15 years old when this happened. I had a dirt bike at the time, and I was driving it over to my friend's house. And when I got to my friend's house, who lived on basically the other side of the neighborhood, his brother was there. And his brother had the 750 Yamaha that he was giving everybody rides on. And my dirt bike was pretty fast, and he pointed at me and he said, "Is that pretty fast?" And I said, "It's probably faster than that, at least in the neighborhood." And he was like, "Come on, like race me." And so I did. We went out, and I blew him away at first until I got up to whatever the bike's max was, 70 miles per hour or something, and then he passed me. So I turned around, went back to the house. He followed me, and then he was like, "You want to ride on mine?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I jumped on the back. We started driving through the neighborhood, and then he pulled out onto the main street. And I wasn't wearing a helmet, and he was trying to show off, so he probably had the bike up to 100 miles an hour, and it was going so fast my face was like pulling back, my eyes were watering, and I was like, oh good grief. I tapped him on the shoulder, and I was like, okay, let's go back now. So anyways, we had driven around a vehicle, and when I tapped him on the shoulder, he just instantly basically slowed down, and he was going to pull into a gravel driveway. Well, the guy we had just passed apparently had been drinking and hadn't realized that we had just basically come to a stop, and we were turning. And as we started to turn, I think he noticed at the last second, and he tried to go around us. And as he tried to go around us, we turned, and he just T-boned us. So the car smashed my leg into the bike. I broke my shoulder on the windshield, and I remember rolling off, hitting the ground, and I didn't feel any pain. I remember looking up at the sky, and the sun had just set. I remember thinking, oh my God, I just got hit by a car. Are you okay? Are you okay? And I tried to sit up, and I knew my left arm wasn't working, so I grabbed it and I sat up. And when I sat up, I was in for the shock of my life. My knee was flat on the ground, and my foot was on the ground at the same time. So my leg was basically broke open right below the knee, and the bone was sticking up, and blood was everywhere. And you can imagine seeing that and it being your own body. I freaked out, and I just started screaming, oh my God. I went into emergency surgery that night, and I've spent 2.5 months in the hospital, and I had more surgeries than I can count. I mean, I'm not kidding. I lost track. The near-death experience that I ended up having didn't happen the night of the wreck. It actually happened several weeks later during supposedly a routine surgery, so it completely caught me off guard. Basically, the start of it was when you go into surgery and they prep you, they take all your clothes off, they put a gown on you. In the surgery room, the operating table, whatever, it's cold. And so you have no clothes on, you're freezing. And they usually would put warm towels on me to just keep me warm and comfortable. I had had so many surgeries already that my veins were shot. And starting an IV on me was challenging because they normally use a larger gauge needle when they prep you for surgery, and I knew just from all the other surgeries that I'd had that it would hurt. So I just casually asked the nurse, I said, could you just knock me out with some kind of gas first before you start the IV on me? And that way I don't have to feel you guys poking around and jabbing and trying to get the needle in. And she said, yeah, that's fine. So they strapped me down. They had my arms strapped down, at least. I don't remember if my legs were strapped down or not, but they had strapped me down. I couldn't move. And the anesthesiologist just walked up to me and just slapped a gas mask over my face. It covered my nose and my mouth. And I wasn't ready for it. I didn't even realize it was go time. I was just, I don't know what I was doing. But I took a deep breath of this stuff, and I realized it was not oxygen, it wasn't air, and I didn't want any more. And I kept shaking my head like, get this off of me. And wherever I moved my head, he just followed with his hand until obviously I was forced to breathe in more. My heartbeat, I could feel it beating out of my chest. It was rapid. And at that point, and this is going to sound crazy, but it's the truth, I saw what I can only describe as a gray alien. I won't even say it was standing. It was at the end of the bed that I was on, and it was looking at me. And it terrified me. For one, I didn't know what it was doing there. I didn't know why it was there. It just didn't make sense. I was freaking out already. And it basically started getting closer and closer to my face. And as it was moving closer to me, I was getting more and more frightened. And it had really big black eyes and a very, very small mouth. And I don't know what it was doing to me, but I was terrified of it. And so I closed my eyes, and thinking that if I close my eyes, I at least don't have to look at this thing. I couldn't get up. I was strapped down. As I closed my eyes, it was still there. Like, it literally, I could see it through my eyelid. I don't know what was going on, but it was still there. And the feeling that happened or was happening to me at that point was, it was almost like it was sucking my memories and my thoughts out of my head. I couldn't have told you my own name at that moment in time. I was completely terrified, and all of my cognitive thinking was just gone. All I was emotion. I didn't have the capacity to tell you who I was, where I was, what was going on, nothing. All I knew is that there was something in front of me, frightening me, and I couldn't get away from it. And at that point, I blacked out. When I came to, I thought I was dreaming. Everything was peaceful. I was looking down on a surgery room with doctors and nurses, and there was somebody that they were performing surgery on. And I just thought, well, that's odd. I mean, I wonder who they're operating on, and I wonder what's going on. And all of a sudden, they started panicking and running around like something really bad had just happened. And I clearly remember, and this is what like frightened me, they had a tray of like surgical instruments, and one of the doctors knocked it off and it fell down, and the tools just bounced and went everywhere. And right when that happened, I thought, well, that's odd. Like something's going on here. This is something bad just happened. And I looked down and I saw just a flat line on like the heart monitor, and I thought, oh well, whoever this person is just died. That's why the doctors are freaking out. And then I actually looked at the person on the table, and it was me. And then it just dawned on me, like, hello, that's you just died, and you're looking at this live. This is not a dream. And I started thinking to myself, like real fast, like, what was your last memory? What was your last memory? What was going on the last time you were awake? And then I remembered being terrified by this alien creature, whatever that thing was, being in my face. But I was in an operating room and I was going into surgery. And I thought, well, there you have it, Billy. You just died. I didn't see any angels or demons or anything like that. I didn't have a form. I was just, thoughts. I still had my mind. I knew who I was. And I was looking down on everything. And instantly, like that, I remember just going from that scenario to darkness. Utter darkness. And I don't remember traveling to it. I just remembered 1 second I was in the hospital room, the next, darkness. And I was terrified, not because of the darkness, but because of the reality of it wasn't a dream, it was real. I just died, and here I am in darkness, and I'm all alone. And it's weird, but I screamed out no. And I could hear my own voice echoing repeatedly. And I'm not talking once or twice, I'm talking repeatedly. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, don't say anything else, because if you do, you're just going to be tortured by your own echoing voice. And I don't know when it's going to stop, if it's going to stop, but that alone is torture. And I remember thinking, how long am I going to be here? Where am I and how long am I going to be here? And I just got this resounding answer in my head, like, forever, you're not going anywhere. This is it. And that actually is why I had screamed out no in the first place. That when I had asked that question and I felt that answer come upon me, I just yelled out no, heard my own voice repeating over and over and over again. And I had an overwhelming sense of hopelessness, unlike anything I've ever felt. There was no hope, not even a glimpse, just utter hopelessness. And that feeling just engulfed me. And right as I was thinking all these things, I got sucked back into my body, and I could hear the instruments in the hospital room, and I could feel the doctors and stuff laying hands on me and trying to hold me down. And of course I wanted to get up. Couldn't see anything. They had gel in my eyes, so everything was blurry, but I was trying to get up. And it must have took 6 or 7 people to hold me down, because they didn't have me strapped down anymore, but I could feel hands all over my body. And I heard a doctor say, basically, drug him, do it now, quick. And of course they injected something into me and I passed out again. Now, the doctors and my parents at this time never said a word to me about this. I guess I found out later on, my dad told me the doctors didn't want me worried or scared because they knew I was going to have a bunch more operations, and they didn't want me to know. And I did, when I remember waking up in the recovery room, I literally shook uncontrollably for probably a week straight. And it didn't matter if I was cold or warm or anything. I was shaking, couldn't stop it. It was almost like I was tormented, and was still, my body was just having a reaction. I could not stop shaking. And I've only seen my dad cry probably 3 times in my life. And when I woke up in the hospital, in my hospital room, my dad was sitting in a chair right beside my bed, holding one of my hands, crying. And I knew that he knew something was up. Of course, that he wouldn't talk to me about it at that time, but he did ask me, he's like, son, are you okay? What happened? The doctor said you had complications in the operation, a reaction to the gas they gave you. Can you, he was trying to fish for information from me. And I didn't want to sound crazy, so I just told him, well, normally when I go into surgery, everything's dark. You don't remember anything when they knock you out. But this time I had a vision, and I saw some things, and it was pretty frightening, but I didn't go into details. I remember having a beer with my dad years later after I was an adult, and this topic came up, and we started discussing this. And he said, son, that day when I was beside your hospital bed crying, the reason why is because your heart stopped in surgery and they had to resuscitate you. And that wasn't a vision like you claim. You actually died. I think I already knew that, but to hear him confirm it for me years later, it was pretty gut-wrenching. The thing that scared me the most is that I never once thought about God after I had died. It was like he had been stripped from my mind. I went to church my whole life. You would think that if I had known that I had just died, that I would be calling out or reaching out or asking for God to help me. God never entered my mind at all. I knew who I was. I knew my name. I remembered my family. I remembered my life, but I never once thought about God. And that deeply disturbing to me after coming back from that experience. I've had years to think about all this stuff. I don't know if you'd want to include that or not. I know your pastor or whoever you interviewed already probably had his own take on things. There is mention in the Bible about a place called utter darkness. And when I read that in the Bible, I believe it's Jesus is the one who mentions it. And that scared me because I've heard of heaven and hell, but this wasn't what the Lord was referring to. It wasn't either of those places. It was utter darkness is what he called it.
The book of Revelation says that when the end comes, that death and hell stand before God. In other words, people that have died, we stand before God. So hell, it kind of actually gets emptied out, and everybody. So it could be possible. It could be possible that hell is a holding place.
I personally thought that it was a precursor to hell, maybe, where you're in darkness for a period of time until Judgment Day, maybe.
But there's something mentioned at the end of the Bible in the book of Revelation called the lake of fire.
As the Bible says, that all the dead are judged, and those that were not found written in the book of life end up in the lake of fire.
And that is the eternal destination of the evil dead.
I often would tell people I wish I had been dead a little longer, because maybe if I was gone a little longer, maybe I was going somewhere in the darkness. Maybe I would have eventually reached the gates of hell if that's where I was, but I wasn't dead long enough to actually get there. I don't know. I didn't feel heat. I wasn't uncomfortable. I was all alone. I didn't hear any noise, any sound except for my own. And a lot of questions, a lot of questions once I woke up and realized what had happened. But like I said, the gray alien thing that I saw happened before I died, not after. I did not see any angels or demons or anything else after I was dead. Nothing. Nobody was standing there waiting for me. No dead relatives, no strange creatures. It was nothing. I saw the people in the room beneath me, and then boom, I was in darkness. So as far as seeing some kind of weird creature moments, seconds before I died, I always thought that those gray alien things were extraterrestrials from another planet or something. I don't believe that anymore.
I see no proof. I've never heard any proof of whether or not aliens exist. I believe that some people who think or believe that they have encountered something like that, I believe in evil spirits and dark spirits, and we are in a spiritual warfare, the Bible says. It could be possible that they saw something in the spirit world.
I believe they're demons or fallen angels or something, and I believe that that thing was there to take me to my destination, even though once I died, I certainly didn't see anything. And I can't prove any of that. I just suspect that may be the case. Where else would those things be hanging out other than hospitals? That's probably a good place to hang out. If you're a Grim Reaper or whatever the term is you want to use, is a surgery room, right? I don't know where my story falls in line with other people that have had near-death experiences, but it's important for me to convey to everybody else out there that may be listening that I'm telling the truth. It's just so hard to judge credibility when you don't know a person. I think it's safe to say that everybody that knows me knows that I'm a very honest person, and I tend to not ever talk about this near-death experience unless I'm talking to somebody that I know or family, because they know me. The only reason I'm telling you guys this now is because I just thought maybe my story might help somebody. Maybe there's somebody else out there that's had something real similar, and they can hear this and go, oh, wow, I finally found somebody else that had an experience similar to mine, and I'm not crazy. Or maybe, we could communicate with each other back and forth and find out, and discuss things. So I thought maybe God was trying to get my attention, maybe because I was a teenager and a wild one at that, and maybe he gave me this experience so that I could possibly share it with others and maybe open up some eyes in the future. The fact that I didn't think of God after I died doesn't mean that I do not believe in God. I do, and I always have, and I still do. But I would be lying if I said that I died, I met God, he told me to straighten up, and then brought me back to life. That's just not what happened.